Something huge is happening in the world of global finance, and it's all about climate change. For years, investors have been trying to figure out the real financial cost of a changing planet, but it's been like looking into a black box. Well, a new global standard called IFRS S2 is about to flip the lights on. Let's break down what this means for pretty much every major company out there.
So here's a question for you. How does a flood in Germany affect a tech stock in California? It sounds a little random, right? But it's actually a super important question for our global economy. The answer is all about these hidden risks that are woven through everything. Our supply chains, our resources, even regulations. And until now, trying to track them has been, well, almost impossible. That is what's about to change.
So here's our game plan for breaking down this new IFRS S2 standard. First, we'll talk about why we even need it. Then, we'll walk through its four-part framework. We'll see how it makes companies totally rethink their strategy and risk. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of metrics. And finally, we'll look at how this all creates a brand new language for finance. All right, so why now? What's the big deal? Well, the simple truth is that for a long time, investors have basically been flying blind. Without one set of rules for everyone, comparing how two different companies are handling climate risk has been a complete guessing game. And that makes it incredibly hard to price risk the right way.
Think about it like this. When you're at the grocery store, you can just glance at two boxes of cereal and immediately compare their calories, sugar, all that stuff. That little nutritional label gives you clear, standardized info. IFRS S2 is designed to be exactly that, a nutritional label for a company's climate health.
So what is it, officially? At its core, IFRS S2 is a mandatory reporting standard. Its whole purpose is to show investors, and really anyone with money on the line, exactly how a company's bottom line is exposed to climate change, both the good and the bad, over the short, medium, and long term.
Now, to make all of this happen, the standard is built on a really smart and honestly pretty elegant foundation. It's all structured around four core pillars, which ensures that the information is always organized and, most importantly, comparable from one company to the next. These are the four big pillars that every company has to report on. First up, governance. Who's actually in charge of the stuff? Second, strategy. What's your game plan? Third, risk management. How do you spot and deal with threats? And finally, metrics and targets. You got to show us the numbers. Put them all together, and you get the complete picture.
But before we go any deeper into those pillars, we have to get on the same page with the language this standard uses. These next few terms are the absolute building blocks, so let's do a quick vocabulary lesson.
First, we've got physical risks. This is the stuff that's pretty easy to picture, right? It's what we see on the news. It's the direct impact of climate change on a company's actual stuff. Think a hurricane taking out a factory, or a drought ruining crops for a food company. Then there's the other side of that coin, transition risks. Now, this isn't about the weather itself, it's about our response to climate change. For instance, a new carbon tax could suddenly make a company's business model way more expensive. Or a huge breakthrough in electric vehicle tech could make gasoline engines obsolete like overnight.
And this is key. It's not all doom and gloom. The standard also makes companies report on their opportunities. This could be anything, from inventing new, in-demand green technology to just saving a ton of money by being more energy efficient. This is where the real innovation comes in.
Okay, let's dive into those first two pillars, governance and strategy. This is all about taking climate thinking from just an idea and embedding it right at the top of the company, connecting it directly to the business plan, and you guessed it, the balance sheet.
Under the governance pillar, you can't be vague anymore. Companies have to spell out exactly which board committee is watching this, how management is held accountable, and even if executive pay is tied to hitting climate targets. Basically, it forces the question, who is on the hook for this?
This forces a company's strategy to prepare for both types of risk. You know, a company might face physical risks, like its beautiful coastal headquarters being threatened by sea level rise. But at the same exact time, it could face transition risks, like all of its customers suddenly demanding sustainable products. A good strategy has to see both coming. And that brings us to the pillar that turns all of this into cold, hard data, metrics and targets. This is where abstract ideas about risk and strategy become real, measurable numbers. It's all about proving you're actually doing what you say you're doing.
And the headline metric, no doubt about it, is greenhouse gas emissions. The standard is super specific here. Companies have to report their absolute emissions, and they have to break them down into three categories we call scopes. Think of it as widening circles of responsibility.
Scope 1 is your direct stuff, emissions from your own factories, your own vehicles. Scope 2 is the emissions from the electricity you buy to keep the lights on. And then there's Scope 3, the big one. That's everything else in your value chain, from your suppliers all the way to your customers using your products. It's the whole shebang.
But it's not just about emissions. Companies also have to report on really important financial numbers, like what percentage of their assets are exposed to climate risks. They've got to show how they're incentivizing change, like tying executive bonuses to hitting climate goals. And they need to be transparent about their own internal tools, like if they use an internal price on carbon. It's basically a comprehensive dashboard for climate performance.
So, when you put this all together, what does it all add up to? Well, the real power of IFRS S2 isn't just in any one data point. It's in creating a single global standard for talking about all this stuff, a new financial language, if you will.
The standard is built to make sure all this new information is actually trustworthy. It has to be relevant to an investor's decision, and it has to be a faithful representation of what's really going on. But the most important parts are that it must be comparable across different companies and verifiable through audits. That's how you build trust in the data.
And that's really the big takeaway here. IFRS S2 is like a universal translator. It takes this messy, complicated world of climate impact and turns it into a standardized language that finance understands. For the very first time, investors can make real apples-to-apples comparisons, which is going to reward the companies that are leading the way and hold everyone else accountable.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for the future, right? With this new level of transparency, a company's climate strategy isn't some footnote in a report anymore. It's a central part of its financial story. So the question now is, in this new era of climate clarity, who's going to have the most compelling story to tell? I guess only time, and now the data, will tell.